Hey Ottawa, my name is Annalee Rice and I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario. And today's video is going to go over a little bit about what has happened in 2023, but also what I foresee happening in 2024 for real estate in Ottawa. Many of my clients, I always say that my crystal ball is broken because nobody can really predict the future, but today I'll try and give a little bit of information on what I think could happen and what to look out for in the coming year. Let's go. Okay, so when we talk about looking into the future, there are lots and lots of variables and lots of questions that come to mind. What's going to happen with inflation and interest rates? What are people going to be looking at for competition? Are prices going to rise? Are we going to see price decreases or drops? How's the inventory going to be? How challenging is it going to be to buy? Are the new rules that came into play? Are we going to see open bidding? All these different questions that we have. And hopefully I'll go through all of the different things and give you my opinions. Okay, so first off, I'm going to talk about inflation and interest rates. This is a little bit of history and a little bit of context. So here is a chart on Canada's inflation rate from the last decade, essentially, and you can see that up until about 2020, it was typically between 1 to 2.5%, maybe 3%. That's just where the Bank of Canada typically likes it. And then the big drop off in early 2020 was to do with the pandemic. And then they, as we'll see in the next slide, they dropped the interest rates to try and raise inflation and not cause a big crash in the economy. And the result was inflation that went really, really high, peaked up just above 8%. And the Bank of Canada has been working really hard to get it back down. And currently it sits at 3%, which is at the top end of their range, but it does take time to come off, and hopefully they'll get it back down to 2%. But that's the Bank of Canada's goal, is always to get it between the around 2%. Now, what does the Bank of Canada do to try and combat that inflation? They play with the interest rates. And so as you can see, same 10-year span there, the interest rates were all, this is not mortgage rates. These are the overnight lending rate, their policy rate, but the prime rate or the variable mortgage rates are kind of tied to this. So, but their overnight lending rate was at around 1%, a little bit lower. And then it was sitting at about 1.75, I think it looks like, maybe 1.5 before the pandemic hit. And then when everything went crazy during the pandemic, they dropped it down to 0.25%. And they kept it there for quite a long time, all the way into 2022. And then inflation got out of control, and then they started raising it, as you can see. I think we've had 10 rate rises in the last year and a half there, and now we sit at 5%. So tied to the rates are the variable mortgage rates, but the majority of people in Canada tend to get 5-year fixed mortgage rates. And you can see that they have historically, again, for the last 10 years or so, they were mostly around the 3%, down to a little over 2, maybe a little above 3. And then in 2020, they dropped down, and they were down to about 1.5%. And then with the increased interest rates, they also have climbed, and it shows it at a little above 5, but I know that people are getting up around 6 even for fixed rates. Now, these aren't specifically tied to that overnight lending rate or the prime rate that people talk about all the time. Those are the variable rate mortgages, but these are tied to the bond yield market, and I am not an economist, so I don't know that much about that. But they do go up when the interest rates are higher, and they move differently. But as we can see, they're still sitting very high, up at around 5%, which makes purchasing a home and having a mortgage very expensive. Okay, so my thoughts on interest rates and inflation. So the Bank of Canada is going to make a decision. You know, they meet 10 times a year to say whether or not they're going to raise, hold, or lower the interest rates. And the next one's in January. And I suspect that for the next little while, they're going to continue to hold to see whether or not the inflation comes off. Now, a lot of organizations are suggesting that they think that the first rate cut may happen in sort of late spring, Q2 of 2024, and then that there may be 2 or 3 small rate cuts throughout 2024. So I think those are very plausible scenarios. And in the next few slides, I'll talk about, sales volume, and we'll talk about how that may or may not affect the sales that we see in Ottawa. But I do think how and when they change the interest rates will have a really big effect, and it could really change the predictions of what we see in the real estate market this coming year. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is sales volume, the number of sales, and the effect of the interest rate hikes on those sales. So first off, we'll look back. So here is the last 2 years. This is from January 2022 through till December. These number of sales is all based off of December 30th, 2023. And you can see that the number of sales, obviously it peaks in the spring. In both years it peaked in the spring. And then the little numbers on the top there, you can see that was the interest rate increases throughout the last 2 years. So it's, you can look at it, and there always is seasonality. The number of sales is higher in the spring. It drops typically in the summer when people go off on vacations and stuff. Typically you get a little bit of a bump in the fall, and then it slows down through the winter months and then repeat. So although they did follow somewhat that trend, you can see that when the Bank of Canada made, especially those 0.5s and the 1% increase in the rates, it really did slow down the market really, like July last year. And it stayed slow all the way through from July straight through until spring of this year. And you'll notice that there was 2 Ps. I put them on top of, March and April. March and April of 2023. So that was the first time that the Bank of Canada had paused and not continued to raise rates. And I do believe that the sales volume picking up, and in future slides there, I'll show you the prices that we saw throughout this year. The sales volume and the number of sales and the prices that we saw, the increases in prices that we saw through spring of 2023 had a lot to do with the fact that they paused those interest rate hikes. So the market picked up, prices started to climb, there started to be multiple offers again. It started to feel a little bit more like what it had in the last few years. And then what did they do? They raised those interest rates again in June and July, and that totally cooled off the market again. And we didn't really have the fall bump that you typically would see for a fall market. So this is just a quick numbers there. This is the breakdown of sales for 2023 for Ottawa. There were just 10,448 as of yesterday. It's December 30th. Through Ottawa. Now, the same as my stats that I do every week, this is the City of Ottawa boundaries for condos and residential, so it certainly doesn't include every single sale and every single thing that's outside the boundaries. But the stats are always the same for what I do, and if you want to see the weekly stats, you can go back through and see every week I've been updating those stats on what's happening in the Ottawa real estate market. I did break it down by freehold and condos, and actually broke out the semi-detached and also stacked condos, which I don't typically include in my stats. So you can see that close to half of the sales are detached homes. Townhomes are a good, about 20% of the sales. And then condos are, about 17%, and rows and stacked are less there. Okay, so this next thing here, I typically include this chart or something similar in my weekly stats. And what I did here was I actually kind of lumped it to, I wanted to simplify it. There were just too many years when I had every year. So I averaged the 2013 to 2015, that's the yellow line. 2016 to 2018 and is averaged out to the green line. I did include 2019 because that is by most included as the last normal year that we had for real estate. So you can see the typical rise in sales up through May, and then starts dropping off through the summer. And usually there's a little bit of a bump in the fall. So September, October, it sort of levels off or slightly rises and then drops off for the winter. Now, 2023, you can see we are below even the 2013 to 2015 average. It did kind of follow the curve, if you want to call it a curve, of what we normally would see, but it was just sales volume was very, very low. And so I think we can attribute that to a lot of unknowns. People don't know what's happening. The interest rates are very, very high. People are with the interest rate so high, and people are wondering, if I hold on and wait a little bit, are the prices going to continue to drop? Because we did see price drops through 2022 and into early 2023, but a lot of questioning and people just not knowing and just holding off and pausing and waiting. And sales volume was very low. This is the same chart, but this is now 2019's in that gray, just to remind you, the light gray there. 2020, you can see that it started off as a good year, just a bit above 2019. And then with the lockdowns and such, it was a bit of a skewed year because everything shut down for a couple months. Very few sales happened in the spring, which would typically be very busy. And then it made up for it in the fall. You can see that we had a very, very busy fall, which is completely abnormal. But the people who had to move, people who needed to sell and buy, it happened in the fall. And so we went into a very, very busy fall season, well above normal and above averages. Now, 2021 was just busy overall. The interest rates, as we saw, were at all-time low. People were seeing the prices of houses climbing, and there was definitely a fear of missing out that was happening to a lot of people. People wanted to capitalize on those low interest rates, get into the house that they want. There was a lot of pressure on people through the pandemic of, moving, getting their own space, a lot of moving out to the country or getting something with a backyard, not being cooped up with all the lockdowns. So 2021 was a crazy record-breaking year in all accounts. It started off very, very quick, very strong earlier in the spring than normal, and it stayed strong throughout the whole year and even had that peak in the fall with a little bit of a bump there. And then you look at 2022, it again started off very, very fast, very strong, just like 2021. But then the interest rates started to be increasing and everybody sort of stopped and went, whoa, the prices are at an all-time high and interest rates are starting to climb. And they expected that the prices would drop, which they did. And so then it just basically, all those interest rates hikes put a damper on the market and it dropped off. So that's the dark blue line. And then again, you've got the 2023 line. So interest rates are very high. Everybody is sort of, backed off from the market. And you can actually see that it pretty much shadowed the latter half of 2022 with very low sales. Okay, so my thoughts on sales volume and the number of sales. I think that, 2020 and 2021 and early 2022 were abnormally high for sales volume. A lot of people jumped into the market because they thought it was their chance. They'd seen the prices had been climbing since 2019 or so. And I will talk about prices in the next little section. But I do think that 2022, latter part of 2022 and 2023, it's really low. And I'd like to say that I think 2024 will be higher than that. I think we'll see more sales. I think that's a pretty safe bet to say. As long as the Bank of Canada holds, and if they do cut the rates at all, I think that people are going to come out of the woodwork, come off the sidelines, and start buying again. There are people that need to buy. There's always some sales, some purchases and sales happening. But I think that a lot of people who have just been sort of pausing and waiting and seeing how high the interest rates were going to go, how low or steady the prices were going to be, they're going to come back. They're going to say, it's time. I need to get, buy a place. The interest rates will have an effect on that. The continued pause going into the spring market will give people confidence to get out there and shop. And especially if they drop the rates, if they, heaven forbid, they drop them right before the spring market, I think the spring market will go quite crazy. But if they drop it near the end of the spring or in the summer, when people typically are a little slower on the buying, then it's possible that that might spur a higher sales volume through the summer or in the fall. I guess we'll see. Okay, inventory. There's always lots of talk about inventory, and so let's look to see what the inventory has been and what do I think is going to happen. Okay, so this is a slide that I use in my weekly updates, and it just sort of shows you what typically the definitions of seller's market, balanced market, and buyer's market. And so if you look back from like 2017 or before, you see that we were well above in the winter marks, the peaks were up into the buyer's market. It would take you 8 months to, maybe not 8 months to sell, but it would be 8 months of inventory on the market. But anything above 6 is the buyer's market. Balanced market, is largely, even in the spring fast times, if you want to call them fast times at that time, was very balanced. So there was, the supply and the demand balanced out. It would take you, 4 to 6 months. Maybe not 4 to 6 months, but it would take time to sell your home. There was 4 to 6 months of inventory on the market, balanced. And it was in like 2018 or so was when the inventory started to drop. So we got below that four months of inventory, and you got into a seller's market. And since about 2018 there, we haven't seen us get into a balanced or buyer's market. And what people have seen for the last 5 years has been a frenzy of people buying, and that has caused the prices to be climbing with the inventory being so low. When there's not enough homes to support the number of people that are looking for homes, that's why the prices rise, and it just becomes a challenge for everybody. Now, we almost reached the balanced market, and these stats are all for the full city of Ottawa, all property types. And I'm not going to try to suggest that there aren't some property types or some areas where you definitely are in a bit more of a balanced or even a buyer's market. Like if there are a lot of homes similar to the one that you're looking at, they're all on the market, it gives the buyer a lot more leverage to be able to, negotiate better terms, negotiate the price down, and have a lot more control in it. But there are certain areas, again, on the flip side, there are certain areas where, a house comes on, it is desirable, and it's definitely going to be a seller's market. So these are citywide, all property type stats, but as a city, we still never quite made it into the balanced market. So just for 2023, we see that we started out, we stayed below 4 really for the whole the year, and you see that it dropped off just in the last couple months, and that was largely because we did have a little bit of an increase in sales, or a holding in the number of sales through sort of October, November, a little bit of pickup, but there was a lot of houses that came off the market late November and throughout December, and so months of inventory being the number of houses on the market and the number of sales, and that ratio, when a lot of properties come off the market, that decreases that ratio and makes it so that you have fewer months of inventory. Okay, so my thoughts on the inventory. I think right now we're sitting at a fairly good level, but I do think with all those houses that came off the market in the late fall, early winter, I think there's going to be a big jump to the inventory in late January into February. And I think a lot of people are holding off until spring just because they think that's when they're going to sell their homes. So it's going to all come down to whether or not how many buyers come out to go shopping this spring. If the buyers come out because they're feeling more confident with the interest rates holding or potential for drops, then that inventory could stay quite slim, and we could have a good solid spring market. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is the average sale price. Okay, so this is all properties across the city of Ottawa boundaries, and it just sort of allows it to kind of smooth And so this includes your condos and detached and all the freehold properties. So we can see that the average sale price, and this is for the last 10 years, obviously, you can see that the sales prices were very steady, slow increases all the way through until about 2018, 2019, which corresponded with when did the months of inventory drop. So as the inventory dropped, the prices started going up. The interest rates were at a reasonable level, and the housing market really did pick up even through 2019. And that was, a strong year. 2020, 2021, 2022, crazy price increases. The next slide will show you a little bit about where the actual peak was. And then 2023 is a drop from 2022, and I'll show you why. So this is just 2022 and 2023, and I know it's a bit busy, but if you see, what I did was on that last chart, it had the average for 2023 and the average for 2022. So that's all sales. But you can see that the peak in 2022, which was kind of like February and March of 2022, was actually even higher. So the average sale price was up 782. Again, all properties, including condos. 782,000 was the peak, and then the prices dropped off quite a bit through the latter part of the year. And then they climbed, and you can see that the majority of the sales being in the spring, that way pulls up the average sale price. And so we had the seasonality, higher prices in the spring, and then again, a little bit of a price drops throughout the latter parts of the year as sales slow down and the number of properties on the market increases. But this shows you that that the peak, we are at about 100,000. Sorry, the average for 2023 is about 100,000 lower than the peak average was, and only about 38,000 for below the average price from 2022. Okay, so I don't expect anyone to read this. This is an excerpt from the Royal LePage Market Survey forecast for 2024. It's a yearly forecast that's released by Royal LePage, and it was released on December 14th. I will include a link to this document or the blog post from this so that you can look through it. But this is the Ottawa section, and I'll just summarize a little bit from here. So the estimate or the forecast is that the average sale price will increase by 4.5% for Ottawa for 2024, year over year. And the single family detached will have a slightly less increase of 4%. And the condos will increase about 5%. And I will read a little bit of the quote here. It says, even if we see only a modest decrease in rates by the Bank of Canada midway through 2024, this move could spark a flurry of buying activity, leading into our late summer and early fall market. And this was Jason Ralph, broker of record for Royal LePage team. The other thing that I'm not going to get into in this update is that we have a competitive rental market, and that's like the rental rates and prices did increase a fair chunk in 2023. And I think a lot of that had to do with buyers who are just sort of sitting on the sidelines and deciding not to buy, and so therefore turning to the rental market. And so with that, hopefully the rental market will ease a little bit with if buyers come back into the market for purchasing. The other last thing here, it says that we do expect a brisk spring market next year. Okay, so my thoughts on the average sale price. Where do I see things going in 2024? I believe that there are a lot of factors that play into this. I do think that right now in these winter months, we're at a bit of a low, as we saw on the prices. I think that's going to be our low point for the year. I think that our spring market is going to be pretty good. And I think with the spring market, prices do tend to rise. Even in a slow year like 2023, prices did rise throughout the spring. So prices will rise in the spring. How much may depend on whether or not the Bank of Canada just continues to hold rates, or if they do decide to drop those rates at all. The anticipation or the confidence that comes from rates coming down or even, the thought of rates coming down will spur a lot of buyers, which will create some competition and bring the market back to a quicker pace. That'll bring prices up. And then, if the Bank of Canada does decrease the rates, that could spur the prices to kind of stay where they are, the market to keep chugging along a little bit more through the summer and the fall than it might typically have. There are a lot of buyers out there, and a lot of them have been sitting on the sideline waiting. So I do expect that, some of them will come back and we may have a good year. With that, the prices would rise. Do I think it'll be 5%? It could be more. If they just hold the rates, or if inflation comes back up and they decide to raise the rates or something, that could put a big, huge damper on things and stall everything out again. Okay, so the next section I'm going to talk about is Ottawa population growth, because that definitely plays a part in all of this. So why did all of a sudden properties go up in price? Why did the inventory drop starting in 2018? This is a busy slide, but I did create a video last year at about this time with some information about urban and suburban Ottawa. And so this slide is actually the same as last year, but updated with the 2023 data. So basically, probably the most important thing to look at there is you see which areas of the city see the most population growth and household growth. So you can see in the central area, there was a fair rise in the population and households, about 7% increase in the number of people living there and households in the central area. On the next slide, I'll have the map to show you what these areas are. And then also the inner area, 4%, 5% increase in households. Throughout most of the rest of the sort of inside the green belt, it was either less than 1% or 1.5% increases. Okay, so this is the map that corresponds with those numbers that you saw on the last slide. So you see the central area, that's like right downtown. So that's lots of completions on either new rental, new condo buildings. That's probably the most the increase there. And then you've got the inner area being the rest of Centretown, Ottawa East, Ottawa, Old Ottawa South, that kind of area. And then the rest of the areas are very much more inside the green belt. That was what was on that slide. And the next slide is going to have Orleans, Canada, Stittsville. South Nepean is what they are calling Barrhaven. Okay, so we see Canada, Stittsville, South Nepean, Riverside South, and Orleans, and then especially Leitrim. So if you look back on the last slide there, those areas are all where the new developments of single family homes, townhomes, and some condos, but mostly the freehold properties. Those are the areas that are being developed. That's where the large subdivisions are being built. And then the rural areas, you see that for the most part, they didn't really change much. Rural Southwest might have been affected by Richmond because they are building a fair amount of homes there in Richmond. But overall, you can see the fastest growing area was Leitrim. So that includes Finley Creek and Leitrim. And you can see they increased by 10%. That's a lot. And so that's, they're very small areas to begin with, but, they're very fast growing communities within Ottawa. And if you look at Ottawa as a whole, the Ottawa population grew by 2% in the last year. And these numbers are all mid 2023 as compared to the same data that I pulled last year, mid 2022. So you can see a 2% increase in the population. And this is the rural sub area, just shows you which areas they're talking about for those stats. Okay, so this graph is a bit of a compilation that I created from Wikipedia data with the census data from back to 2001, and then including the City of Ottawa data from the last couple of years. So we can see that Ottawa's had an increasing population over the last 22 years. 2001, it was below 800,000, increasing every 5 years by between 5 and 9%. The years up to 2021, there was almost a 9% growth, which is, helps explain why housing became a little bit more sparse, a little less inventory. What started to grow the fury in the real estate market. And then just in the last 2 years, and again, this is just the City of Ottawa data, and it was mid 2023, those data. So we've seen almost a 6% growth from just the last couple of years. And so all of this puts a lot of pressure on the housing market. So I don't have, on the next slide, I don't have my thoughts on population, but I will share my thoughts here. I think that the population growing this quickly, we are not keeping up with the number of places for people to live. And that continues to put a lot of pressure on housing, whether it's rental housing, rental prices, and also on purchasing of homes. So we have sort of all these factors that are leading into a strong real estate market where there's lots of competition, and that makes prices go up. Okay, so my thoughts for buyers. This is sort of summary pages. My thoughts for buyers. Step one is to find your team. And what do I mean by team? Every buyer needs to have somebody that's working to get them that mortgage pre-approval. Unless you got lots of money, which you're probably not buying cash for your first home, I would suggest a mortgage broker, because that mortgage broker will shop around to the different lenders and find the best mortgage product for you. It may not just be the rate. It may be other factors, other things that make that mortgage product better for you in the long term. So find that mortgage broker, find out how much you can afford, and find a realtor that is going to help you, walk you through the process, and be your advocate, work for you, and help you get into that home. Step two is organizing yourself, making sure that you know how much you can afford. You've got everything, your needs and your wants all sorted out. You may want that extra bedroom, or you may want the garage, but do you need it? Could you do with a carport? Could you, you have to balance what things cost versus what you can afford. So organize yourself. And step three would be shop, get out there, and stay updated. So your realtor should be sort of helping you, keeping you abreast of, what's happening in the market. Is the inventory climbing? Is it a good time? Are there houses are sitting? Is there some deals potentially to be had? How quick you need to be in getting out to see places? What can you expect with offers? Are there potentially going to be multiple offers? How quick do your decisions have to be? Some people don't want to make super quick decisions, and so shopping during the peak spring market may not be for them. Organize yourself, stay updated on the market, work with your realtor to know that stuff, and work with that mortgage broker throughout this time to see whether or not the rates are changing. Like if the rates are holding or the fixed rates are dropping because they're anticipating rate drops in late spring or into summer, update that mortgage pre-approval. See if you've got more purchasing power. And then also just, staying updated of what's going on. And then obviously step four is to buy. And your realtor will help you with that, help you with the negotiations, and walk you through all the steps all the way through to the day you move in and beyond. Okay, that's for buyers. Okay, so my thoughts for sellers. So step one is the same, find your team. Now your team is, although it's the same, you still need to talk to your lender. You need to know what your finances look like and what penalties and such you're going to have for changing your mortgage. Is your mortgage portable? But you also need your realtor. And I would say, find a realtor that is going to work with you through the process to make sure that your house is prepped and give you the honest truth of what you need to do to make your house as appealing as possible so that it will sell promptly. You do not want to be sitting on the market for months and months dealing with showings, especially if you have kids. It is exhausting. So find your team, get that the plan in place to get all the little projects done if needed, declutter, touch things up, and everything well in advance. You don't want to be cramming it all into just a couple of weeks. Step 2 is prioritize. So back in 2020, 2021, early 2022, it was advisable for people to buy first and then sell. And that was because if they had it was hard to buy. You'd be in competition and such. So people were, securing what they could, getting their new house, and then it was really easy to sell. So then they would sell. Then in 2023, even probably late 2022, it flopped around. So then now people were, you had to sell first so that you knew what your budget was, you knew how much your house had sold for, and you knew the timelines there, and you had a lot more choice for buying. The inventory was higher, so you could buy second. Make sure you know which type of market you're looking at. Talk to your realtor. It may be different depending on what you're looking at, what type of home you're looking at, depending on how specific you're going to be on what you want to move into if you're buying. And also what your timelines are. Do you really want to move at a certain time of the year due to kids or schools or work? Do you have to move at a certain time of the year? Prioritize, figure out that plan, work with your realtor to make it happen. Step 3, stay updated, and also react accordingly. So if the market is changing, such as inventory climbing or dropping, or the prices are changing, your realtor should be giving you regular updates and letting you know how the market's changing, what that means for you, and how you should consider changing your plan to make sure that you are going to sell. And of course, step 4 is sell. Okay, so I covered a lot of these things. We talked about months of inventory, sellers, buyers, inventory, inflation, interest rates, average sale price. I didn't really get into blind or open bidding. I will put a slight comment here. The rules in Ontario did change as of December 1st. You will see that there are new documentation that you're going to be presented, whether you're a buyer or a seller or even a renter. There's a document from the Real Estate Council of Ontario that you will be presented to fully explain the benefits of a realtor and what it means if you decide not to work with a realtor. So you will see that right off the bat, and your realtor will explain it and you'll acknowledge it. After that, things are largely the same, except that now you can have a realtor being your designated representative. This is going to cut back on the possibility of what is called multiple representation, when both the buyer and seller are being represented by the same real estate brokerage. Now, if the buyer and the seller each have their designated representative, that's their realtor, then there is no multiple representation in those situations, which allows everybody to get better and more complete service from the realtor and the real estate brokerage. And the other thing that happened that changed was that the government mandated that sellers have the right to be able to have an open offer. They can share the contents of offers, whichever parts of the offer they wish, within limits. There are certain things they cannot share, but they can share. They can choose to maybe share the offer price with all of the other offers. I'm not sure how common or regularly we're going to see this. And there are some things in there about the buyer being able to say that they do not want the contents of their offer being shared. These are things you're going to discuss clearly with your realtor and make a plan. But do know that it is possible to have open offers where contents of offers are shared with the different parties that are submitting offers. So you may see that. With the spring market, if it's a quick market, we may start seeing multiple offers. Again, in some cases, we've even had multiple offers throughout this fall and stuff. It just depends on the house. It depends on the area. But, will we see multiple offers? Will we see inventory be high? Obviously, there are lots of questions, and I hope that I've provided some answers throughout this presentation. Okay, so if you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section of the YouTube video. Again, I will include that link to the LePage forecast for 2024. And if you have questions or comments, just generally, please get in touch. My details are there. And if you enjoy this, please give it a like, follow along. Every week I provide the real estate stats for the Ottawa Real Estate Market, and I'd be happy if you listen along. Have a fantastic 2024, and I hope that everybody has a great year ahead.